Hi there, my name is Austin Kirkland. I am the Director of Sales over here at ScatterSpoke. Really though, what my day-to-day involves is working with prospective customers of ours and giving them demos of our tool and of our platform, the software and how it all works, making sure they get onboarded and that onboarding process goes nice and smooth. And then I just manage the relationship moving forward. I take feedback from our clients, and a lot of times actually from the feedback that we get, directly results in new features added to our platform. So if you ever have any of those ideas, don't ever hesitate to let us know. We really, really value that kind of feedback, and negative feedback as well. That's equally as helpful. We want to hear about those things as well, so that way we can always improve. I'm sure we can all appreciate that. So anyway, getting into things here, what we're looking at is your ScatterSpoke dashboard. This is what you're greeted with upon logging in. And the way we're looking at it, the view in which we're looking at it, is from an organizational perspective. So this is the tip of the spear, if you will. So below organizations are programs, and below programs are teams. So programs can have multiple teams underneath them, but teams cannot have anything underneath them individually. So as an organizational view, you get a high-level overview of all teams. Okay, and then so from a program view, you can see insight into all your team's data, but you can't see information into other programs' data, right? So that's just kind of one thing I wanted to point out there. And then another thing too, I want to draw your attention to up here in the top right-hand corner are these three dots. First of all, that's where you're going to find a lot of your settings. You can go in there and adjust things as needed. But the biggest thing that I wanted to point out here is the parking lot, or as I like to call this, your shower thoughts. So a lot of times, and I'm speaking from personal experience here, like in meetings, for example, sure, you'll be involved and what have you, but then, an hour later, maybe the next day after the meeting, you get this brilliant idea that's directly related to that meeting, but it'd be super random or completely off topic to bring up now. But you want to have a place to put those shower thoughts, as I call it. This is a great place to put those ideas. So you can add them to your parking lot directly within ScatterSpoke, but we have developed ScatterSpoke to integrate into most of the tools that you're likely already using, like Teams or Slack, Jira, anything like that, we integrate to. So you can create like a new channel or a new folder, whatever you want to do, titled parking lot items or shower thoughts, whatever you want to title it, but you can put those ideas and thoughts in there. It'll automatically sync up to your ScatterSpoke dashboard, and you'll have that available to you during the next retro. And I'll show you what I mean by that here in a second. And then, of course, the thing that's standing out to everyone here like a sore thumb is the action items with a number next to it. So yeah, the biggest problem that we hear from our clients before they come to us is primarily the inability to track unresolved, really, or just action items in general, primarily the unresolved ones or the progress of the action items, et cetera. So what we've given everyone a view of are unresolved action items. So you can see the number corresponding to it. You can click it. So you can open up a view that will give you just a quick rundown of all the unresolved action items. But if you want to get a little bit more insight into each individual specific action item, you can simply just click it and it'll open this up. And you can see all the information that you would need to see. So that is that. Now that we've got that all squared away, why don't we go ahead and just jump right into a retro? So I'm going to create a program retro. And the first thing you'll want to do once the screen populates here is to add a name. So I'm going to say demo recording retro. And then below that, you have types and formats, right? So the format is the format of the retro you want to run. These are pre-populated by ScatterSpoke. We are working on adding more. Don't worry about that. But what we're also working on is the ability to have our clients load in or build custom formats. So let's say you're already using one from another company that you really like, or you're simply married to that company, but you still want to use it with us, whatever it is. You'll be given the ability to actually custom make your own formats, which is really nice. But currently, that's kind of down the road for us. It's absolutely in the works by our engineers. It's just not available at this moment. So anyway, these are the formats you have available in either a column or a canvas view. So I'm just going to create a custom retro. All right, here we are in the actual retro. We're viewing this essentially as a facilitator. So you're loading this up prior to the actual retro starting. So real quick, a couple of things I want to point out. On the left, you'll be able to see all the participants of that retro, name, and then number of cards. So this will give a tally of the amount of cards that individual person has added. This will really help, just making sure everyone is participating within the group. If you see, a certain member or members, not participating, adding cards, or later on voting, that'd be a good indicator for you to maybe just ping them, let them know that they need to start participating in adding cards. That way you can gather, actionable feedback. And then over here again on the left, but at the bottom, you'll want to click retro settings. And this is something you'll want to get into a habit of doing prior to starting any retro. So for starters, what you're able to do within the settings is rename the retro if you need to. However, it'll show you the selected template that you're on currently. If you need to change it, you'll actually have to exit out and start a new retro with the correct template that you want to start with. You cannot change a template once you've started a retro. Just a quick thing I want to point out there. And then below that, default is on for tooltip hints, which is this down here. That just kind of give you, the facilitator, hints as to what you should be doing per phase. And you can toggle that off if you find it distracting or what have you. And below that, we've given you the ability to make this retrospective public. And what that means is you don't have to have a user license to ScatterSpoke in order to join into this particular retro. For example, a really good use case for this are organizations that maybe have an outside consulting firm or outsourcers that they're working with, really anyone outside the organization that's part of this project that needs to be involved in this retro. And so what you can do is you can toggle that on. You can click the share link up here and send a link to those individual people. And all they'll need to do is just simply click the link and they'll be dropped into this retro. There's no sign up, no activation, no confirm your email address stuff. It just drops them right in there. But one thing I want to point out about that, it does bring up some security concerns. So you want to make sure that when you are sharing that link, that you are sharing it to the appropriate people. Ideally, if you can, keep it within the organization, but I understand that that's not always the case. But that is something that we do have available to our clients should you ever need it. So I'm just going to go ahead and keep this as private. And then, finally, add parking lot items as column. Yes, so those parking lot items that we were talking about that I called shower thoughts, you do have the ability to go ahead and load them up as their own column within the retro. So I'll go ahead and do that. It's right here. There's no cards that populated from it because I don't have any parking lot items. If there were items, those items would be individual cards based on the item. So that's that. Now, what you're going to want to do as the facilitator is go ahead and categorize these columns into whatever you want to do. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. Actually, before I do that, there's a couple of things I want to point out here on the screen. So down below here, right here is where I'm at. I just want to just go over these three buttons. So the one on the left is simply a timer. So you can choose if you want to add a timer to this retro. You can add a timer at any point. There's really no specific time and place that you need to do it or that can only work. You can just start it kind of whenever you want. So it's counting down right now. You can add a minute if you need to. You can reset the timer if you'd like, but that's there. And then you have the ability to also add unresolved action items. This is one of our most popular features. We have a lot of popular features, I think, but this, whenever I'm doing a demo with someone like on Zoom or something, they love this so much. So yeah, these action items, these unresolved action items that we have up here, you can go ahead and bring those in as their own column. So this is awesome because the reason why I would say it's one of our most popular features is it goes back to being able to track those unresolved action items. So of course you're tracking it throughout the weeks and months and all that, but it's good to be able to load them up just directly into this retro because this is something that you'll probably want to talk about and bring up before anything gets started. Before you do anything, it's probably something that you want to talk about. So it's just a really good thing to be able to toggle on and off. So we're going to leave that there. And then finally, the last of the three buttons over here on the left is going to be the ability to either remove the guided process or keep it. So you can exit and it'll go away, or you can keep it on if you like. Okay, so now what I'm going to go ahead and do is start adding topics or categories to these columns as a facilitator would. Okay, so now as the facilitator here, I've already added the topics / categories to these columns. So now that you're actively in a retro now with your team, you've gone through the typical sort of chatter that always happens at the start of every meeting in retro. So now what you're going to want to do is start prompting your team to add cards where they want to give their feedback or input on. So each team member is going to start adding their own cards. As they start adding cards, no one's going to be able to see them, including the facilitator. The only thing that you'll be able to see as a facilitator is how many cards each person has added, but you can't see which cards were added. We do this on purpose. We believe being anonymous in terms of giving feedback is crucial because what it's going to do, it's going to encourage open, honest feedback from the team. It's going to promote a psychologically safe environment, which is going to allow your team to feel comfortable in expressing their true feelings or concerns. But understandably, having an anonymous retro isn't always something that you want to have for various reasons, which is totally fine. If that's the case, just instruct your team to mark their cards with their name or their initials, either before or after their cards. I'll give an example here. Here's an example, AK, right? So now that card is not anonymous. So you'll be able to see who put what where. But default and just the way this works, it's all automatically anonymous. We find that the type of feedback that's given in an anonymous environment is much more truthful and actionable. With that being said, once everyone has finished adding cards, you're going to go ahead and move on to the group phase. So before we actually move on to the group phase, I'm going to go ahead and add some cards in here for us. Okay, so I went ahead and just added some cards here. All of these cards are mine. You can see my count. I've added 11. In reality, all these cards would not be mine personally. Obviously, it'd be a mixture of everyone in your team. But one thing to point out before you actually move on to the group phase is to just double check to see how many people are participating, where their numbers are at. And if you see any sort of people who seem to be unengaged in terms of how many cards they've added in their feedback, it might be a good time to just reach out to them real quick. So now we're going to go ahead and move on to the group phase. So here we are in the group phase. As you can see in this view, the columns that were visible previously in the other phase have now been completely removed. The only thing that's showing is the cards. And these groups, these cards will be visible to everyone at this point. Who created them will still be anonymous unless, of course, you added the thing where they have to put in their initials or their name to make it not anonymous. But what you're going to have your team do here now is group these cards together as they see fit. And so what you're going to be doing here in terms of grouping the cards is you're going to be quite literally dragging and dropping the cards into a similar category, or that's what the team members will be doing, dropping into what they deem to be a similar category. And then our AI will automatically suggest a new group name based on the similarities of the cards of this new group. And crucially, you'll still be able to see which column that card originated from simply by hovering over the color on it. So this card was originally in the things I need for productivity. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and group these cards together as if I'm all the participants in the retro. Okay, so actually before I do that, I was going to go ahead and group these offline, but I want to show you how to group them. So what you'll do is you'll just simply drag and drop it onto the group. And then our AI will sort of recognize various different keywords or key topics and automatically suggest a new group name. This gets smarter the more data that you have in here. In any case, if you need to edit it, you absolutely can just double click it and you can say something. I don't know. That was a really, really poor choice in terms of categorizing. So I'm going to go ahead and group all these together, and I'll meet you in the next phase. So here we are still in the grouping. I went ahead and grouped everything. So you'll be able to sort of see a common theme happening based off of these new groups. So take a look at it. You can edit this if you need to. So like this, I would say would be things holding us back, something like that. That would be kind of the overarching topic for that group. So now that we have that done, we have everything grouped together, everyone's kind of happy with how everything's grouped together, it's time to move on to the voting phase. Here we are in the vote phase. So a couple things to point out here real quick is these now have votes on it. I believe they actually had them in the group phase as well, but this will give you an indicator of the number of votes that each person has placed. And then down here, it says set vote count. So this has been added now in this vote phase. Our AI will automatically assign a set number of votes per person. However, if you want to override that, you absolutely can. You can, add one if you need to. You can, subtract one if you'd like. It's totally up to you. I'm just going to do 4 for now, just because. So you're going to prompt your team to go ahead and vote on I would say the topics or categories that they deem most important. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now for us. Okay, so I went ahead and distributed my 4 votes like so. So this is what I'm deeming personally as important enough to garner 50% of my votes. So now that the whole team has done that, again, before you move on to the final phase, just take a quick glance over here to see if there's anyone not participating at all and throwing in votes. Just want to make sure everyone's involved at this stage. And then you go ahead and move on to the discuss phase. And here we are in the discuss phase. So this is the part of the retro where most of our clients end up spending the majority of their time during the retro, largely because this is the place where you've narrowed the focus of conversation. And this is where you'll be driving improvement via action items set in the retro. So over here on the kind of left side, it'll organize these cards, these new groups, I should say, in terms of what the participants deemed most important. So it'll be most important, most votes at the top, least votes at the bottom, and everything in between. And it'll automatically populate, everything on the right, like the first topic on the right here, but you can jump around if you need to. So yeah, you just talk about it with your team. If you're a team member and we've talked about this enough, we don't need to keep going, it's time to move on, you can just simply select I'm ready to move on, and they'll be notified. The facilitator will be notified. Okay, a lot of people are ready to move on. Let's go ahead and move on. Before you do, you're welcome to save the card as an action item. You can change the title if you need to. It'll actually track the number of votes that was given, which is pretty neat. You can assign a due date, assign an owner to it, etc. You just move on, card by card, and just do that. Go talk about these action items, assign them to people, create due dates, etc. And then when you're done, you just click End Retro. After you click End the Retro, this will be the screen that shows up. It's sort of a recap screen, so you can see the new groups that were created and then where they originated from, the original categories. So you'll have that. You can share this information if you need to, or export it if you like to save these. I know a lot of our clients like to do that. So yeah, that is an overview of how to run a retro with ScatterSpoke. So before we dive into the full-blown analytical dashboard, just want to point out some quick view things that you get on just your home dashboard here. So this just gives you a quick glance at certain things. So you can see based on time, so this is just pulling it from last month. From this view, it's only last month. You can see how many retrospectives were done. You can see in relation to last month, if that's higher or lower, participation rate, action items created, et cetera, et cetera. So let's go ahead and pull up the entire analytics dashboard. So this is your analytics dashboard, or as we call it, your pulse dashboard. Because what this will allow members of a company to do is really keep their finger on the pulse of the rest of the team, right? You can kind of see where we came up with that name. Having data that's easily digestible, it's hugely important because as we can probably all agree that the things that we measure are things that get better. And let's be honest, that's why anyone purchases a software of some kind. It's usually to make their life a little bit easier, to make them more productive and things of that nature. So to start real quick, the North Star for this information is heavily based on action items. It's pretty interesting. When companies join ScatterSpoke, their typical turnaround time on resolving action item is right around the 60 to 90 day mark, which, as you can imagine, is pretty eye-opening for a lot of people. Unsurprisingly, we do see this number drop significantly as our clients use our tool more and run retros more. But of course, this data is only useful if you're running retros often, or how diligently your team is at actually marking the action items as resolved once they're resolved. We are actually working on a syncing feature where, as you literally complete an action item in real time, that action item will automatically be marked as resolved. So this will remove the possibility of human error, and it'll just give more accurate and real-time data. So yeah, I just want to give that information as far as the background of this information. But quickly here up at the top, it's a little bit more snippets of information. It's different than what's on your home dashboard. So this is showing average number of cards per retro, average time between retros, average time to resolve action items, etc. And you can view this information by individual teams or programs if you'd like. And you can change the date range of the information as well. Okay, so let's go ahead and dive into the fun stuff. So these graphs right here, I'm going to be talking about the one on the left first, the one that says action items over time. So you might recognize this as a cumulative flow diagram. Basically, what this is doing is giving the viewer a visual representation of how many action items are opened versus how many are closed, and then how many action items are overdue or unresolved over a specific period of time. What you want to see in a perfect world is kind of like a stair step graph between the blue and the green line. So as an action item is created, there'll be a resolved action behind it, and then another one will be created, and so on and so forth. What you want to keep an eye out for is deviance in between created and resolved. So as you might, if you start seeing, created action items, start creeping up, but then the resolved action items are not following it, that might be an indicator to you to have a conversation with the team to see what's going on. If they need extra help, if maybe there's another bottleneck within the process that wasn't brought up in the retro. And then you especially want to start talking when or if this overdue line starts creeping up on you as well. So that's just a good thing to keep an eye on. It's something that you'll want to check weekly if you can, daily be better, just to see how things are progressing. But then moving over here to the right, it takes this data a little bit further. So this is a pretty typical scatter plot diagram. I'm sure we've all seen it before. But what's happening here is our system will mark an individual point on the graph, indicating how long it took that specific action item to be completed. So once it's completed, boom, our system will automatically mark a dot on that graph. So this is why resolving action items as they're completed is really valuable and helpful, because it'll give much more accurate reporting into how long it took to actually close those action items. Because if you're seeing a trend, it's 14 days, 14 days, 14 days, well, you obviously were just closing out those action items on the day of the retro. So it doesn't really help too much. And what's really cool, all the clients that we've worked with have seen a downward trending line, meaning that the average time to close an action item has decreased after using ScatterSpoke, because the things that we measure are the things that get better, right? Okay, next, I want to talk about this graph below the action items graph. So this is your average sentiment over time. And so real quick, before I dive into that, we believe, and a lot of our clients absolutely agree with us, that work production and employee happiness are symbiotic. So we of course want to track, how quick and how effective your team is at completing their work, but it's equally as important to track, their happiness levels, right? Because especially right now, I mean, employee retention is incredibly difficult with the market that we're in. So keeping an eye or a finger on the pulse, if you will, on how people are feeling will really aid in keeping employees around that you want to keep. So what this is showing is really over time how people are feeling or how they're talking rather. So the way we're gathering this information is through retros, of course, but through integrations as well. But yeah, I just wanted to bring everyone's attention to that sentiment over time because it really is important to keep an eye on the happiness levels of your employees. The happier they are, the better work that they're going to do. It's been proven time and time again. So below the average sentiment over time graph, we have a couple of other data features here. So all this information is being pulled directly from retros, from cards. And so you can quickly see, in a glance what people are talking about the most during their retros. Therefore, it should be an indicator to you that's what's most important to them based on just how often they're talking about it, right? So you can quickly see here, wow, process is far and away the most common talked about thing. It's the most important thing that people are talking about. What's going on with it? How are people feeling with it? So you glance over here to sentiment by theme and you look at the process. You're like, oh, okay, well, it's being talked about a lot. It's very important, but at least it's being talked about in a positive way. So that might prompt you to get some insight into what about the process changes maybe that has sparked, some sort of positive sentiment result. But this is something that you'll also want to just be glancing at, every week if you can, just to see how things are going, see if you see any sort of trends. Ideally, you want to start seeing these green lines start to creep up. But again, it's not a perfect world. Any changes that you implement, it's not guaranteed they're going to be well liked, but this will give you feedback at least from an anonymous point of view. But anyway, taking everything just a little bit further, I'll show you sort of how we're gathering this data. So all this is being put in via topics. So you can see by word, which things are being brought up the most. You can see by bigrams, right? So 2 words, what topics are being talked about the most, trigrams, 3 words, etc. So that's just some really good information, I think, to have. So you can see some commonalities between the themes and then the sentiment of those themes, and specifically the words that are being used to create this data. And then below all this, you can see the cards by theme by month. So all this is doing, it's breaking down this data monthly, right? And this is really good, or I should say, this is really helpful if you're in an industry that's very cyclical. Or, I mean, really any industry kind of sees this, especially in December, we'll see this a lot. So like people, this people category will spike up in December a lot because people will bring that up in their retros often. They're talking about how, person X is out, visiting their family, this other person is sick. That's like the cold and flu season. So that tends to be talked about a lot more in December. But if you have a cyclical season within your industry, you can attribute, various different, themes or categories that are being talked about more often than any other month. And then finally, below that is overdue action items. This isn't really showing too much because there's only one fake overdue action item that I created. But if there's more, of course, these would all populate. So that's everything. That is your rundown of the Team Pulse dashboard. So I really hope you enjoyed it. If you're listening to this for the first time and have other questions and want to have a little bit more of a one-on-one demo, please feel free to reach out to me. More than happy to do that. Company size does not matter. Everyone's treated the same through my eyes. However, if you're someone who's already a customer or a user of ScatterSpoke and you're watching this as kind of like a refresher, and you have some feedback that you want to give me or some ideas or features that you'd like to see implemented within ScatterSpoke, also reach out to me. Again, to reiterate, we're always constantly trying to improve things here. Either way, I thank you for your time. Again, my name is Austin Kirkland. My email is austin.kirkland@scatterspoke.com. Reach out to me for anything you need. But I wish you all the best and nothing but success.